Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by, and I think I extend this from all the parties and everyone involved in this trial, just first thank each and every one of you for your service in this case, for being an extremely, by all accounts, punctual, diligent, and attentive jury. All the parties appreciate it, and all the parties would ask that you just hang on a bit longer while we get through this last phase of the trial. As the court indicated, this is a closing argument, and it gives us an opportunity to go through the evidence that you've heard, to apply that evidence to the law, and to present the case in a final summation. You've heard from, I believe, 49 witnesses. You've been presented with 330 plus exhibits throughout the case, extending weeks, multiple items of evidence, multiple witnesses, and a great deal of evidence to consider. At the end of the day, however, and as I spoke to you about during voir dire, this case will come down to whether or not you believe Conrad Murray acted with gross negligence or criminal negligence in his treatment of Michael Jackson. It'll come down to whether or not you believe he was a substantial factor in Michael Jackson's death. He need not be the only factor. He need not be the only cause. He only need be a substantial factor, which is defined as something more than trivial and more than remote. Ladies and gentlemen, the evidence in this case is overwhelming. The evidence in this case is abundantly clear that Conrad Murray acted with criminal negligence, that Conrad Murray caused the death of Michael Jackson, that Conrad Murray left Prince, Paris, and Blanket without a father. For them, this case doesn't end today or tomorrow or the next day. For Michael's children, this case will go on forever because they do not have a father. They do not have a father because of the actions of Conrad Murray. Now, what this is fundamentally about is trust. Trust between a doctor and a patient. We've heard a great deal about the doctor-patient relationship, this hallowed relationship, this special, historic relationship where a patient relies on a doctor's best medical judgment, where a doctor is assumed and is entrusted to provide the best medical care to do no harm to his patient. And that a doctor will use that best medical judgment and provide that best medical care regardless of the requests of the patient. Because a doctor has a legal duty, an ethical duty, to do no harm. A doctor has a duty to his patient. And from each and every doctor that you heard from in this trial, whether called by the people or the defense, you heard that if a request was made to provide medical treatment that could cause harm, that doctor in the end would have to say no and walk away. The doctor is the decision maker. The doctor is the one entrusted with the medical knowledge. The doctor is the one in the relationship who at the end of the day makes the decision as to what is proper medical care and what is in the well-being of the patient. You've heard from many doctors in this case who told you that if they were presented with this situation, they would absolutely say no and walk away. Not only did you hear about that in a hypothetical sense, but you heard from specific doctors called by the defense who were presented with such a request and said no and walked away. Because they believe and acted in accordance with their belief that a doctor has an obligation, a solemn obligation, to first do no harm to their patient. Conrad Murray violated that sacred trust each and every day. Each and every day, Conrad Murray violated that sacred trust premised on that hallowed relationship between a doctor and a patient. It was an employer-employee relationship. Conrad Murray sought payment for services rendered. Services rendered being the provision of propofol to Michael Jackson in his bedroom on an almost nightly basis for over 2 months, according to Conrad Murray's own words. For services rendered, not for proper medical care, not for the sake of doing no harm, but an employee-employer relationship for services rendered. This relationship of trust that is so important between a doctor and a patient was grossly corrupted by the actions of Conrad Murray. Michael Jackson trusted Conrad Murray. He trusted him with his life. He trusted him with his own individual life and the future lives of his children, trusting that Conrad Murray, as Michael slept, would care for him so that in the morning he would awake to share a meal with his children. But Conrad Murray corrupted that relationship, and for that, Michael Jackson paid with his life. We know that on June 24th, 2009, Michael Jackson performed at the Staples Center, and by all accounts, great performance. He was optimistic, he was looking toward the future, and you've seen live footage of him dancing and singing and performing and doing what he loved to do. We know from the date this image was taken on June 24, 2009, that in about 12 short hours, Michael Jackson lay in his bed, palms up, head tilted to the side, dead in his bedroom at 100 North Carrollwood. We know during this time frame, June 24, 2009, what Michael was doing. He was rehearsing, he was practicing, he was preparing for one of the biggest tours of his career. And we know now from hearing all the evidence in this case about his outlook on the future, what he planned to do, what he planned for his family, what he planned for his business future. We know he was optimistic. Was he anxious about the tour? Absolutely certain he was. He's a 50-year-old man embarking on one of the biggest tours of his career, 50 sold-out shows at the O2 Arena in London. Who wouldn't be anxious about that? He wanted to satisfy his fans, his family, his children. He was a creative genius and a perfectionist, and he went about these tasks striving for perfection, striving to perform at the top of his level, striving to satisfy the fans that had been so loyal to him for so many years. And he wanted perfection, and he wanted to be the best. And despite any normal anxieties he may have had about that endeavor, he was optimistic, he was excited, he was looking to the future. We know October 2008 that he had relayed to Randy Phillips. If you recall, they were at the Bel Air Hotel before Michael had moved into 100 North Carrollwood. The children were there running around in Halloween masks and costumes, playing, and that's how one of the reasons Randy Phillips remembered that it was October, because it was near Halloween. And Michael had expressed that he didn't want to be a vagabond anymore. He'd been traveling, he wanted to buy a nice house for his children. He wanted to settle down. He was looking toward the future. He was making plans, long-term plans, for both himself and his 3 children to whom he was so dedicated. We learned about the tour and what Michael hoped to accomplish with this tour and why it was important to him. Kenny Ortega told us how this environmental message of Michael's had always been so important, and it resonated through his songs, not just his own personal beliefs, but his messages to the public, to the lyrics in his songs, and this was profoundly important to him. And he wanted to share this message. He wanted to express this voice throughout this tour. He wanted to repay his fans and again do a top-level performance in gratitude to his fans for all their years of loyalty and support. And probably most importantly, he wanted to do it for his children who had not seen their father put on such a performance. And he wanted them to come see what he does so well. He wanted his children to see what he has spent his whole life doing, being creative, being a performer, being an entertainer. He wanted his children to experience that. And that was one of the foundations for his desire to go forward with this tour. We know his children were paramount to him. One of the things he'd expressed to Randy Phillips that part of the contractual, the deal they had, he wanted a large estate in London while the tour took place because he didn't want the children to be cooped up in a hotel room. He didn't want the family to be trapped in a hotel surrounded by paparazzi. So he wanted a large estate with streams and horses and animals so his kids could lead as normal a life as possible while this tour unfolded. We knew about his future plans to make movies. He wanted to make a feature-length film based on the song Thriller and the video Thriller. He discussed other movies. He wanted to get into directing. He had plans. He had hopes. He had dreams, as we all do, both for himself and his family. We heard about his desire to open a children's hospital. We heard this not only from the drugged recording of May 10th, 2009 at 9:05 in the morning, but in Conrad Murray's own statement to the police, he comments that Michael wanted to create this children's hospital, to give this to the world. That Conrad Murray said he was hoping, or he had been asked to be the medical director of this children's hospital. Michael had plans and hopes and dreams. We knew also that the tour was discussed. It had been discussed that the tour, following this successful leg in London, these 50 shows, it was hoped that it would expand across the world, go through the United States. Again, there were plans and dreams and hopes that were very well known to those around Michael Jackson during this time. But we also know, as we heard from multiple witnesses, that what was paramount to Michael were his 3 children. And his dreams and hopes were intertwined with those same dreams and hopes that he aspired for his 3 kids. One of the reasons he was so excited about the tour, if you recall, was because it was going to be beginning that summer. And the kids, relieved from the obligations of school, would be able to accompany him and go on the tour and see their dad perform in London. But none of this came to be. None of these dreams, hopes, aspirations, or desires came to be because on June 25th, 2009, Michael Jackson, just 50 years old, was pronounced dead. We know and we will discuss the circumstances of that death. We know and will discuss how Paris had to come in and see her father in that condition and scream out, "Daddy," as she broke down in tears. How Prince had a shocked face, shocked look on his face